Welcome back to the channel. In the last episode, we dry fit the shelves into the closet. We had a few issues that we had to resolve. Now that those are fixed, we're going to be assembling and installing the shelves today. I start by dry fitting all of the shelves onto the side frame, and that way I can make sure I'm happy with the angle of everything and the spacing between them prior to actually putting the shelves in permanently. I'll be using those dummy blocks from the very first episode to secure these shelves and to provide support on the backside. Notice that I'm starting with the very top and the very bottom shelves because these are going to drive the spacing of the rest of them. Even though I calculated where I wanted everything to be previously, dry fitting is very important because actually seeing how it's laid up, I didn't like the position of the top shelf relative to where I initially thought I would want it, and I had to relocate it and then change the spacing of all the other shelves as a result. This is why dry fitting is so critical in woodworking, is until you see everything in place, you're not positive whether or not it'll actually work for what you're trying to achieve. What this means is sometimes it's helpful to actually just start building it and see how it goes, rather than trying to plan meticulously to every last detail and then realize that you have to change half of the details and measurements anyhow. After recalculating the distance between the shelves based on these new dimensional changes, I start putting all the other shelves in place. Make sure to really take your time if you're putting a bunch of items in parallel, because if any one of them is off with so many others next to it, it'll really stand out.
I now have all of these little blocks tacked on using a couple of brad nails. The plan of what I'm going to do is have the shelf sit on top of these. What I'm planning on doing is putting some brad nails through to go to this. These are already on the side rails, and then that's going to keep the shelf nice and secure. Now, I almost went through and put these first couple shelves on, this one and this one, because they weren't going to block these back screws from going in. However, what I realized is that when I go to tack down the board onto these little side blocks, if this shelf here is in place, that means my access to the one below it is going to be blocked. So if I have this one and I'm trying to get the tack nail into this back corner, having another shelf here in front of it, there's no way I'm going to be able to get a nail gun in there. For that reason, I am going to have to assemble this all after it is screwed onto the wall. The other thing I wanted to check is how square all of these boards were on the back, because I don't have anything that's going to be behind the door trim on this side that's going to secure everything to the wall. So I found that this one here is a little bit off. You can kind of see when I get in there, there's a little bit of a gap, so it's got to come in a little bit, about probably 1/8 of an inch or so. This one's pretty good. This one here, because it's going to have that top catch-all shelf, it's going to be fine just because it will be supported along the whole length. What I'm going to do to try to square up this one here on the bottom is I'm going to hold it in place. I've got another couple extra blocks, and I am just going to tack it in, and hopefully that holds it secure enough. If not, what I'll do is I'll cut a bigger 45 angle cutout, and that'll be a corner gusset more or less. Now obviously I've got all these little blocks tacked on to support the shelves that are holding the shoes, but I don't have one set up currently for this top shelf. Digging out the top shelf, this is where it's going to sit, is kind of over the whole thing. It is still going to need something to secure it because there's not really anything else for it to grab onto, and I don't really feel like going through the entire end trim piece, even though I probably could. The reason I don't want to is the risk of it breaking, because if you look at the side profile, if you hit anything there, it'll probably splinter. On top of that, I do need something on this back wall and or this side to support it against the wall in more than one location. That way it doesn't sag over time. So that said, I'm going to put those couple more small blocks in to support it where I need to support it. Then we're going to take this inside and install it in the closet.
For the bottom backer board, I held it in place and then put in one of those corner blocks on the bottom, and that actually was enough to keep it square, so I didn't have to cut the 45 gusset, which made my life a whole lot easier. For the top catch-all shelf, you'll notice that I don't attach the support block to the farthest right, and you'll see why that is in just a moment. Moving back to the closet now, I start by getting the shelf at the correct height, and then I secure those 3 backer boards to the wall. Now going back to that support block on the top right that I didn't install, you'll see me here trying to tap in a wood block that's going to fill that corner behind the trim of the door. The top right support block would have prevented this from going in. It turns out the 2 blocks I cut for this were too big anyway, so I had to trim one down before being able to fit it in. With that filler block in place, I then dry fit the top catch-all shelf and then place the little corner support block underneath it and tack it into place. The entire placement of this block was dependent on how the shelf dry fit above it, and as someone who likes to plan and know things in advance, this kind of made me very nervous, but I think it came out pretty well at the end. Next, I move on to installing the shelves, starting at the bottom and working my way up, and all we're doing here is putting a little bit of wood glue on those support blocks on the edge, and then tacking the shelf straight down into that support block. It's a little difficult to reach the blocks after the shelf is tacked in place, but I did my best to try to clean up any excess wood glue on the underside. After getting this final shelf into place, we are ready to move on to the next portion of the installation.
So I have realized 2 things with assembling these shelves. The first is that I cannot count because there are 5 shelves and not 6 like I initially intended for. However, the good news is that when you test fit any of these shoes on here, because these are farther spaced apart and you're a normal sized person, you're looking at it from the top down, Now you can actually see what they are. If they had more shelves, they'd be closer together. So it would be a little bit more tucked in there. It'd be a little bit like that, and you'd only be able to see that back portion of the heel when you're trying to figure out what shoes you want to wear. So am I an idiot? Yes, but did it kind of work out in my favor? Also yes. The other thing I've really noticed is how horrifically off square that this side trim piece is on the door. So I'm gonna go down. You can see that the gap here, it's flush here on the back, and then it's a wide gap on the bottom. That's the same thing there. It's the same thing there. It's the same thing there. And these are pretty squared off. I did check them a few times with the camera off. I actually got these all pretty close, but even just looking down this trim board here, I can easily tell in person, this is actually angled so it comes down at like this way. Not quite as sharp as my hand is going, obviously, but here's one good place to see it is up here on the top where it meets the other one. The gap between the board and the edge of the board above, you have a lot more gap here on the inside than you do here on the outside. So it's extremely off square. It's a little bit frustrating, and it makes my fitment worse. So while we could go back and try to fix the gap on all of these and get it all perfect, the level of effort to do that, I would have to take off this trim board, make this actually flush first, shim it out, and then pretty much dismantle the closet to do that. Then go back in and reinstall all of this. But because, like I said, these are permanently attached, I would quite literally be dismantling these, and I would probably break at least a few of the shelves. I definitely should have done a better job dry fitting all of these before. So as unhappy as I am with it, it's not worth going back and redoing, because the angle I will normally see that at is here where the gap is still hidden. So I will be able to live with it, even though it's going to annoy me whenever I do look at it in those rare occasions. So I'm gonna go murder a bunch of people and hide the bodies or something to deal with my frustration. But in the meantime, before I do that, this front corner, kind of like I was worried, is a little bit loose. So because these can't come out anyway, and because I don't want those flopping around and breaking at some point, I am going to take the other spare blocks I had down there, and I'm going to be doing pretty much the same thing that I did over here to secure it on the one side, only I'm going to go directly into the trim piece. Let's get this all finished up with those little corner blocks to add a little more support. Then the closet project will pretty much be done, so I'm a little excited for that.
So starting at the bottom and working our way up from there, I actually didn't have any difficulties with installing these corner blocks other than on the very bottom one, trying to get underneath of it with the nail gun to tack it into the trim board. There wasn't a lot of space, and it was really difficult to maneuver the nail gun into there. If you're trying something like this on your own, what I would recommend doing is either moving the shelf up higher so that you can reach the nail gun in there, or making sure that you tack that front support piece in prior to putting the shelf into place. I then tack on the top catch-all shelf, and then I put a block in the front corner so that we don't see the exposed plywood ends, and then we're ready to load these up.
And with that, the shoe rack is now completed. I definitely think going down to 5 shelves instead of the 6 I initially planned for, while unintentional, was probably a better move overall anyhow. Currently, I just have all the watches thrown on that little catch-all shelf I have on top. I don't know if I want to do a designated watch shelf or a small watch hanger in this area. For now, I'm thinking I'll just keep that there. I think that looks pretty good as it is. I am definitely happy that I put these front corners on little blocks as well. Again, it's sticking out a little bit, and I'm not thrilled about that, but it's at least quite sturdy now for all of the front corners, so I don't think those are moving anywhere. Obviously, I'm not using this as a ladder or anything at any point in the future, but I do think that it is going to hold up quite well. This will easily last as long as we are going to have this house, and it will also probably last a substantial amount of time after that. The only gripe I do have, and I was a little bit worried about this, is I didn't move this top shelf down enough that it doesn't pinch any of the toe space at all up top. So these are a little bit tight in there. You could probably have seen in the time lapse I put a bunch of shoes in there until I found ones that fit. So the Sperry's are soft enough. Even so, they're a little bit close to hanging off on the bottom edge. As you can tell, these are a bit beat up. I'm going to replace these anyhow. So I might try a different style of shoe, or I might just get another pair of Sperry's, and hopefully those will still fit as well. But other than that, I'm actually really happy with this project. I could probably add a shelf up top at some point, but I really don't have a need for it or anything I want to store up there in the meantime. Also, the watch hanger right here, I think this is going to work well enough that I won't need to do that. So for now, I am calling this project closet completed, and thank you guys for watching.